Nas once rapped on Got Yourself a Gun. My first album had no famous guest appearances. The outcome? I'm crowned the best lyricist. He's decided to follow that formula with KD3. In a world where you're just one tweet away from being canceled, there's few things that remain consistent in the 2020s. McDonald's McFlurry machines will still be broken, you can pay $8 to be famous on Twitter, and Nas will continue to drop an album each and every year. King's Disease 3, as the name implies, is the third installment, the trilogy between Nas and Hitboy, and this may be the best one yet. The 17-track album, while on first glance can appear a little daunting, is a bold and ambitious step by Nas, especially considering there are no significant features on it at all. It's just Nas all the way through with the production of Hitboy teaming up for a rare third time. I mean, Nas normally changes producers at this point. You don't get Nas albums back to back to back, but in this case, the grind and the consistency is about to pay off. He even reminisces on this in the first track, Ghetto Reporter, saying that they know he doesn't drop this often, so cherish it, like your daughter's graduation or kids' marriages. It's a smooth, cool piano, a great introduction, and something that I've said about Nas throughout his career is that he really is like a ghetto reporter. He just has a way of observing where he's from, of what goes on in his hood, in the communities around him, and finding a way to convert that into the poetry and storytelling of rap. And this is magnified with lines like that Malcolm C and Maya Angelou and God are holding a camcorder, further affirming Nas's place in how he feels as an observer to what happens around him. Legit takes us back in time with a nostalgia sample from the 5 Heartbeats, a 1991 film. Nas even raps about the film with a line, "Don't get Eddie Kane trying to sing your way back to the group." Eddie Kane actually was kicked out of the group because he fell to cocaine, fame, and drugs. He's also got a really dope bar, NASA, but without the A at the end, which of course spells Nas, and he's about to take off into flight like NASA with that punchline. And overall, it features some of Nas's iconic musings on his rise from rags to riches, but as he so eloquently puts at the end, he still didn't forget about the roaches and the mice, and he never will. Thun might be one of the hardest tracks on the album. It really shows off Hitboy's production and his attention to detail. It is just an ice cold, East Coast, old school type of feel that is perfect for Nas to layer his drop down gritty cadence over top of. And he's got an absolute iconic line shouting out the age-old rivalry and beef between him and Jay-Z, which of course is now squashed, but still, he's dissecting lyrics from Takeover. Sometimes I text Hove, like, this ain't over. Oh man, can you imagine if we got Ether 2 one day or Takeover 2? He's even got a borough to borough New York salute shouting out KRS-One, but with a little bit of a spin on it. KRS had a diss track that bridges over Boogie Down Productions, but instead of KRS-One dissing Queens and saying that Queens is faking it, Nas flips the script on it all and says Queens is caking it. I've said this before about Nas tracks, like sometimes he just has these moments and these lines where it feels like instead of telling about history, we're literally witnessing history on the track. That Jay-Z line and that reference and the KRS-One shout out and flip, definitely 2 iconic moments from this album. Michael and Quincy is another nostalgia track, shouting out the days of Michael Jackson when he used to work with Quincy Jones. There's even a Nas reference to Thriller on there. Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal, moonwalking amongst some other MJ lines. Kind of like the glory days of the collaboration between Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones before they fell out, before they went their separate ways, and Quincy accused Michael Jackson of stealing people's lyrics and styles and doing whatever, being greedy for money. You know, Nas much in the same way has sort of those reflections on days past, days that have gone, the glory days of old, the trials and tribulations and controversies of the here and now. He's got a great line too saying that America's a baby that's teething, shitting on itself, crying for the next feeding. 30 is a track with an absolutely buttery smooth, amazing flow. Nas has this great stop-start scheme, this accelerated moment in between bars where he really shows off his flow technicals and ability. We've also got another iconic moment when Nas raps and muses. I wonder why Pete Rock did that. Talking about Pete Rock and the song The World Is Yours, and Pete at the time came out, took it to the press, said that Nas wasn't paying him royalties, that the label Sony wasn't paying him royalties. Nas obviously felt a different way about it, wondered why Pete didn't reach out to him directly and made shit a public issue. But besides that singular moment, I feel like this track takes a more bigger picture type of vibe and sort of Nas like sitting back, reflecting on the past 30 years that he's had in the game, dropping albums, his longevity within that game. He's got a very clever bar playing off of ESPN's 30 for 30 with Nas doing the numbers, making highlights through his 30. And it's really just a reminder that Nas is an OG, and it's amazing to see the longevity. And this is one of those songs that kind of just encapsulates that. Hood to Hood is a shout out of all the different hoods across the states. Hey, he's even got B More in there, right down for the home team, DC as well. But it goes even further than just a shout out track. Nas really takes this track as an opportunity to speak out on the violence within the hood, the violence within the inner cities, all of this black on black crime that he's tired of. He wants to cultivate communities, he wants to grow, and he starts to ask some of the harder questions with this track. There's no coincidence that it's also based off of the documentary Hood to Hood, where they go around to different hoods throughout America documenting the gang violence and the lifestyle. Nas even laments how it seems like in the prisons, Latins, Jewish communities, they have each other's backs, yet it seems like the black community does not look out for itself and lift each other up. So he proposes a definition to redefine what hood to hood is and redefine people's acknowledgement of it. Recession Proof furthers this reflection on the cycle of violence, and he's got just a very slick JFK bar in there. Like John Fitzgerald with his girl in a drop, if he can get hit, then anyone can get got. And then Nas always willing to drop some wisdom into his bars to try to inspire the next generation. Ain't nobody recession proof, invest in you. That's what it's best to do. Reminisce is another track I gotta shout out Hitboy's production on. I mean, it's smooth, it's soulful, it's just got the right keys, it takes you back to church, and it's got an amazing vocal sample cooked and layered into the beat itself. Nas' street poetry and intellect really shine through on this track, especially with lines like "We could gun blast or party," great Gatsby theme. And of course, he's got bars: "Fresh white tee, 2 diamond crosses look like a hashtag. News is fake. Never knew I'd relate to Tom Brady going for 7 in Tampa Bay." I mean, come on, shouting out the GOAT Tom Brady. Nas, much like Tom, having longevity in the game, feeling like he's been at the top, operating at a high level for a while. You know, with all the media attention, all the press, all the negativity, everyone saying that he's going to fail or fall off a cliff at some point, he just continues to output quality music. The last third of the song also completely changes course and just turns into a wild drill beat from Hitboy that Nas shows, hey, he's got the next generation and the next vibe with. Serious interlude is storytelling Nas at its finest. Him telling about a fling that he had with a rich dude's girl, even though Nas was not rich at the time himself. It's definitely a similar tone to Reminisce. Nas talking about some of the good old days, but storytelling in the way that we know Nas to do. I'm on Fire starts off with flames and doesn't let up from there. I mean, Nas even raps, "Still got the same flame behind me" from the Hate Me Now video, the classic Hate Me Now track that he did with P. Diddy. And he's got more fire bars and schemes. I make him stop, drop, and roll, move to the side. I'm Rap's arsonist. He's also got a dope making them explode scheme, saying that he's going to take them to hell, that he's bringing the smoke. And then the last line might be one of my favorites when he's on fire, like the classic NBA Jam games when you just hit one too many trays and started firing on the hoop and inflaming everything. But that fire could also be a double meaning and sort of a dual layer. Fire in the sense that Nas could be setting fire to his career. People expect him to drop off. They're saying that his career is on fire, but then Nas sort of taking that inferno, harnessing it, using it to his advantage, turning that negative to a positive, saying that he is still on fire, that he's still going strong, and that he's still got a lot more to prove. And for those who say that Godson isn't with the new school lingo, you have to look no further than WTF SMH. And this one is definitely a song to teach the younger generations and another opportunity for Nas to speak out on the glorification and cycle of violence within the hood. Demonic motherfucker, what you do comes back. God bless the trap, but I want to see you untrapped. And then lines like "We manifest destiny like a knight, trying to be there for all my kids." We saw this on Nas's track I Can, where he really uses his music as an example, where he starts to take his rap and he starts to use it as a tool to teach and to try to empower. Nas even playfully muses on possibly buying and building a casino to give back to his community and create more jobs for his area. But overall, the importance of this track cannot be understated. I mean, this is Nas really taking the opportunity to try to enact change, to try to affect people's minds and how they view situations through his music. "Once a Man, Twice a Child" is a very clever flip on that very theme and the idiom of "once a man, twice a child," which essentially states that, you know, you enter this world, you are a child, people have to take care of you, you're in diapers, you grow up, you take care of yourself, but then eventually you hit old age, and then you turn to a point where you become so weak, maybe you end up back in diapers again, and you're like a child once more because you rely on other people to take care of you and look after you. And Nas takes that as an opportunity to reflect on the value of time, to reflect on the value of age and wisdom, and you know, he kind of comes to a realization that he's been through a lot over the years. While he still feels young, while he still feels like he has a lot to give, he also realizes that, you know, time isn't indefinite. His time will end at some point, and maybe that's why we've got King's Disease 3, and maybe that's why he's on such a grind, and he's working with almost such urgency that we haven't seen in such a long time from him, because he just knows how valuable time can truly be, and he wants to reflect that within this very song. And that's backed up by lines like, "By the time you see the stars in the skies, they are already burnt out. Same way these dudes be shining but been burnt out." He's got an absolutely ridiculous bar. "And you die tomorrow, then you're born again. So life is deathless." You know, we talk about Nas and religion, and this is a great example of that. Sort of being born again, believing that there is truly life after death. Nas taking a more philosophical outlook on that here. And he leaves you with that antidote: take advantage of your youth before you're elderly. Cause today is the youngest you'll ever be. Doesn't get more wise than that. I love the jazzy, soulful vibes on Get Right. For me, it's kind of like a cinematic panorama view of NYC into some of the lifestyles within the city. Nas again taking up his calling of being a street reporter and just finding a way just to talk about so many different situations within the city. You know, it really transports you to New York. It makes you feel like you're a part of it. You're right there. You can hear all the sounds. You can see all the sights and the smells that only Nas is really capable of taking of and converting into music. There's even some homage paid to the Notorious B.I.G. with his party and bullshit outro. And that homage continues into First Time, where he shouts out Biggie, he shouts out Pac, he shouts out Slick Rick, and a number of other iconic artists. It's very much like moments from KD2, where he talks about the first time happening, first time occurrences and situations. But in this case, a lot of it is the first time hearing Nas, first time being put onto some of these amazing artists. And much like he did on that track, it's almost like he gets the time machine out and he transports us to just a different time and place. Beef might be my favorite track on the album. Nas gets into his personification bag, much like he did on I Gave You Power or Last Words, where he embodies a gun or a jail cell. In this case, he embodies one of the things that's been a constant throughout the history of hip-hop, and that's beef. He looks at jealousy, he looks at pride, he looks at miscommunication, he looks at different emotions and different situations around some of the greater beefs throughout hip-hop and what led to them. One of my favorite lines, I could confuse a genius, have him moving real dumb, and nothing over convenience. But with Nas, yet again, he takes this and doesn't just talk about beef, he also uses it as a teaching moment. I'm really feeling like Nas is just getting in his parable bag throughout this. Before I know it, he's going to start walking on water if we're not careful. Lines like parents of every slain rapper, wish I didn't exist. Love too many deceased over me. From Who Shot You to Hit 'Em Up to Tupac's song. Obviously, Who Shot You being Biggie's track, Hit 'Em Up being Tupac's track, and then we all know how that beef ended between Tupac and Biggie. And just one too many great contributors to the culture and to hip-hop lost through beef. Don't Shoot introduces us to some very grimy, gritty guitars, some pulsating vocal samples in the production again. And much like kind of how he ended beef, Nas continues to talk about the violence, in this case saying, don't shoot. He also points out the contradictions within his own music, where one day Esco be rapping about he's shooting me, next day he's saying I can. It be confusing me. That obviously referring to Nas, you know, you can be anything you want to be in that track I can be. But much like Nas himself, while he maintains that character that he's always had, even from the days of Illmatic and Stillmatic, you know, he's still continuing to grow. He's still continuing to evolve as his life changes, as the world around him changes. He finds a great way to kind of keep a level head, but also to just learn from all of the past mistakes, all the past moments, and what you get really is songs like this. You get now this teacher Nas who wants to give you this wisdom, who wants to speak out on the violence that he sees, who wants to set an example and try to enact a more positive, better future and outlook for tomorrow within his communities. And he's always wanting to give back to QB, to give back to Queens, to give back to NYC, to give back to all of these communities that are just so rich in hip-hop music, but also destroyed by violence, destroyed by the cyclical nature of beefs and materialism, and just caught up in so much of the wrong things and the wrong feuds a lot of times. I mean, Nas even tries to manifest. Imagine no man shot for the next 10 years, no man killed for the next 30. And really for me, that track is kind of the culmination of KD3. It really just puts a nice bow on top of it. It kind of brings all the different themes and elements together and is a good way to sign off. But of course, it's not the last track, because we have a bonus track of Till My Last Breath, where Hitboy once more flexes the production. We got just some dope-ass Latin brass on this one, and it's a very swaggy type of track from Nas, a very sort of optimistic track going forward, just Nas barring out, doing what he does. One of my favorite lines, we can't say anything without offending. First Amendment, you replaced it, rigged it, dumbed down is not an option. And whereas Don't Shoot feels like a conclusion to the album, Till My Last Breath definitely feels like maybe a preview or a hint that there still could be more to come. Overall, in terms of all the King's Diseases, I feel like this is Nas's best project yet for this series. It's definitely the most consistent. It's very, very airtight with the production, and I thought it was just a great choice by Nas to not really have any features or distractions. It really allowed him to really focus on the messages that he wanted to give, to focus on the themes that he wanted to hit. Whereas you got a lot more experimentation on the other two albums, with this one, you definitely get a lot more of those classic, soulful, old school beats, but the way that Nas handles himself with some of the more technical flows, you know, his rhyme schemes, his poetry, his storytelling ability. It's definitely songs that just feel timeless. It feels like they can exist in any decade and any era of music, and I really feel like Nas put out a timeless album with this one that has a positive impact, that speaks out on violence, that speaks out on a number of conditions within the inner cities, that speaks out on the injustice. And it really can serve as a catalyst for change and serve as an example that Nas wants to pass on to the generation who grew up with him, to the generation today that is first being introduced to him. I mean, it's amazing how many years he's been in the game, but I really feel the hunger with King's Disease 3. I really feel like when Nas first started, you know, it's almost like he's rapping like he's out of time. Like he knows that his end could be right around the corner. It could be at the next moment. And it feels like Nas is really trying to grab and squeeze that moment and hold it and cherish it as much as he can. So Nas, you were Knox Hill certified. Hope you guys like the album review. Just a different type of video for me. I want to do some more of these album reviews. Obviously, when artists that I'm a fan of, bigger artists, dope artists that I want to support, I will put them on the channel. I will do stuff like this. But yeah, hope you guys appreciate what went into this. If you do want to support the channel directly, please subscribe, notifications on. It does go a long way. Comment down below any of the reactions you want to see me do. Stay safe, stay positive. I love you. I'll catch you again.